Welcome to the Blackout Show, presented by the Guillen Grid, a show about the Chicago White Sox baseball, the good, the bad, the ugly. We'll debate what's working and what's not on the south side of Chicago. It's old school versus new school baseball. And most importantly, we're keeping all the receipts.
And we're back, fresh off the Crosstown Classic. Gonzo, it felt like we escaped a little bit. Should have swept the Scrubbies Monday and Tuesday, but we're sitting here Wednesday. We two hit them. A very potent lineup. We two hit them. Jay Targaryen, Chris Gonzalez, a.k.a. y'all call him Gonzo. We're sitting here. It's the Blackout. We're live Wednesday evening, celebrating the dub. Gonzo, like I said, it was a little bit of meat on the bone Monday and Tuesday. How do you feel surviving the third game of the series?
I have to keep my feelings in check from riding the high of sweeping the Tigers to being three pitches away from sweeping the Cubs. And that didn't happen, obviously. And Jay, I have to wonder right now, is Jose Urquidy our best pitcher? Which is quite the thing to be thinking about, because again, we're gonna definitely dive into it, Jay. But I wasn't impressed when I saw Jose Urquidy for his debut at Comerica, but we'll get to that, Jay. But Jay, I think it's time for a good Targaryen rant. What do you say?
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. I don't really like being mad at Will Venable.
Oh, I think we lost Jay. I'll have to remove Jay until he gets back. Let's see if I can get him back again. Sorry, Jay, we have technical issues.
No, it's just.
We lost Jay. All right. Let's just allow Jay to allow his internet to get in check. But in the time being, before Jay goes off on his thoughts, I was at Comerica this past weekend for what was a pivotal series and really was a statement series for the Chicago White Sox as they went to Comerica, with Detroit at the time only 3.5 games back. And the White Sox went to Comerica. And let's also mention this before I continue with my thought there. Detroit has the best differential in the division. They were plus like 80 for the division. So I think the Sox had like plus 40. So we did have second in the division. So it was a pivotal series, guys. And the White Sox, I'm not going to lie, I was nervous going to Comerica. That's my first time in Comerica last Friday night and didn't know what to expect, especially when the White Sox were going on a 11-game stretch of no breaks, nothing, and a pitching rotation that wasn't set up for the series in Detroit. Kind of similar to what we saw at Wrigley, actually. But, however, let's just go back to, again, Detroit. So Tigers actually lined up their rotation for that series. So going into that game one, they had Jackson Jacob going up against essentially a bullpen game. And Will had Sean Newcomb go out there. And to say the least, Tigers got roughed up in that game. White Sox won it like 9-5. And we're going to get more into Detroit momentarily. But again, as Jay comes back, he's just having technical difficulties. We'll get him back shortly. We are going to divide for tonight's show. We're going to go into Detroit. We're going to go into the series that we just had with the Crosstown Classic. And then essentially after the Detroit series conversation, we're going to not only talk about the Crosstown, but there were some absolute lapses from in-game decisions with Will Venable, and we're going to go into them. We can go into a whole bunch of just criticism on Will, which we will do, but there were some pivotal moments as well that that really kept us in the game, that were also in-game decisions that Will made in the right. So it's going to be an interesting conversation tonight. Our job here in the Blackout, again, we're talking baseball. We're going to make sure that everything's discussed. We're not here to totally just be all fruitful in conversation with just talking about the I guess you want to say being the optimism, right? Just talking nothing but positivity. We're going to be right in the middle, right? We're talking about criticism going both ways. So again, when I get Jay back, that's what we're going to do. However, going back to the pivotal moment of that Detroit series, and we got Jay back. So Jay, let's just start there since you're back with us now. You're about to go on your rant before we talk
us.
Detroit conversation. Yeah, I know they don't want us talking on the Guillen Grid. So go ahead, Jay. Take it away. Oh, looks like it's just not our night with technical difficulties at the moment. We'll keep trying with Jay. In the meantime, I'm just gonna be straight out begin with Detroit. Yeah, we've seen a bunch of starter situations with starting it up, like Fetty, for example, right? Both Fetty, they tried it with Noah Schultz, Davis Martin a couple of times. Again, you have a reliever start the game because the analytics are saying that the starter can't make it through the first half of the lineup to begin the game because the first inning is the worst for some of these starters. So on Friday, Sean Newcomb began the game, and he did well. Fetty limited damage early on, and it just came to a situation at the end where the offense finally caught on and took over. And not only did they take over, but the bullpen did its thing, and the Sox ended up winning. And ultimately, that whole weekend was just bullpen handling the offensive lead, and a lot of outs were coming out of that bullpen. And ultimately, Sox swept the Detroit Tigers, but it took a lot of that bullpen to do it. But I want to come back to that because I want to focus a little bit on the hitters. Going into that series in Detroit, Miguel Vargas, and even Murakami, they were both cold, and we saw really great at bats from Miguel Vargas. Miguel Vargas had like a 400 batting average with like 3 home runs, I think, in that series. Murakami started to light it up. But my best, I don't want to say my best, but my most favorite player actually of when I was there on Friday watching live was Braden Montgomery. And And Braden Montgomery had some absolute amazing at-bats. Sorry, I'm getting text messages from Justin here, but great at-bats from Braden Montgomery. He was spreading the ball all over the field, and that was really impressive, to say the least. But it took a lot because I saw when I was there live, I was watching Braden Montgomery just take fastballs opposite way. I saw him take an off speed and pulling it. Really great series out of Braden. And for me, that's a player, a really huge role player that we are seeing starting to take stride. And I do want to get back to him a little bit more when Jay gets back into the Crosstown Series, because that was difficult to watch Braden in some of those at bats, specifically the off speed. But what I liked about most with Braden, it's really the highs and lows of this, because he had such a great series in Detroit, has a rough time at the plate at Wrigley. But then we saw it in the last game of the series in Wrigley, where Braden had an assist from right field for essentially a double play, getting 2 critical outs there at the end of the game, with the fly out and then the assist to third base and gun the runner down. Because we saw some really solid base running actually from the Cubs in that series. So that was a good momentum play right there from Braden. And it impressed me because even with, the challenge at the play, at the dish, and that mentality, he didn't keep it there, onto the field at least. And he was able to defensively get the outs. And that was critical, especially in right field, which for us Sox fans, that's huge, because we've all seen, from right field, the struggle defensively in the past. So considering Braden gunned that runner out at third base, that was huge. And we got Jay back. So Jay, kind of a little bit all over the place, because there was a lot I saw in that Detroit series.
Yeah.
But now that you're back, I want to hear your thoughts first, so we can kind of get in line again, because I know you had some thoughts to this conversation you want to start out the show with. So go ahead and take it away, my friend.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on, but the Detroit series, we swept them, but why didn't we see more Tanner McDougal? Like, what's the point of calling him up? Like, he had over 10 days rest as a guy that you could use in different type of situations. You're not going to ask him to start outright. You're not going to ask him to pitch high leverage. So what's the point of calling him up with Hagen Smith when you gave Hagen Smith the lion's share of the run? Now, granted, I'm happy for that because Hagen Smith has been outstanding. But at the end of the day, what did you call Tanner McDougal up? Like, his cup of coffee wasn't even half full, Gonzo. Like, come on. So, like I said, we escaped Wrigley Field, salvaging a game. We didn't get swept. Some of the guys in our division lost today. Brandon Lau walked off the Tigers. Pretty spectacular. If you didn't see that highlight, did the Giants beat the Tribe today?
I did not even get to check for those updates. Let me take a look.
Either way, that sweep with Detroit, Gonzo, was so important because we answered a little bit of questions about the team. Jose Urquidy, can you trust Braden Montgomery in run producing situations? Remember what was that, game 1 where he was at 1.3 for 3? Like, in Detroit, in Comerica.
You said Braden?
Yeah, Braden.
I think Braden was 3 for 5, but yeah, he started off 3 for 3.
Right. And you got Kenwo crying because he got to start him in fantasy. And I'm like, look, Braden's going to live on base in Comerica because he's going to have to battle. This team is putting these young kids in position to fight for their life, Gonzo. Think about what I'm telling you. Like, we're talking about lumps at a certain, Brayton wasn't hitting the ball overly well. Miguel Vargas went into Comerica in a slump. Antonacci was just a human. Like, you know what I'm saying? Murakami wasn't feasting like he usually did. You know, we went into Detroit having to answer some questions about some guys that have to show us something, and they answered it emphatically.
Yeah, and let's start there with McDougal, and then we'll dive right into
Kind of pissed me off a little bit.
Detroit. Yeah, because all right, this is perfect, right? Because let's take a step back to begin the offseason.
Right.
Chris Getz put a statement, which really is a sentiment for the long-term plan, and that is the continued development of the system. That's at the big leagues, that's throughout the organization, continuing development, right? And we saw that early on, them focusing on the youth. And to this, or up until I'd say July, I think that was the case. And then I think it just seems like there's a holdup for what, I think it's a struggle of a young GM trying to figure out, is he going to be totally, is he going to be totally aggressive going forward here the next couple of months? Is he just going to maintain his stance with the organization? This is just speculation, right? Because there's a way of going about that, right? That's just his own approach. But not only do you have to take that approach, you have to push that out to the rest of the organization. So you're all as one doing this together, right? And you have a situation where even before McDougal, Jay, you have I think he's your highest ceiling arm in this organization, and Noah Schultz. I'm not gonna downplay it, right? He struggled through, like, I'd say June, and then came July. I really started seeing from my side of it when I saw him uptick the cutter usage and the sinker together to play off the shapes. And once he started doing that, it was like mid to late June. I want to say late June, going into beginning of July, right before that A start. You saw the walks come down because his last 4 starts, 3 of the 4 he had no walks, right? But before that, the walks were, as they do to any pitcher, you start, putting men on base. Usually that comes back to bite you in the ass. So,
yep.
We all knew what was happening with the walks, and the question was, is he going to make adjustments and go about that, which he did. And I think that's Bannister with the situation with the cutter and the sinker. That's a situation of Bannister. We know he's a changeup guy, but Schultz would throw a changeup here and there, but that's not I would say it's not a highly used off-speed pitch in his repertoire right now. And we know that when it comes to Bannister, that is much more his direction. So the fact that he did alter with the cutter sinker, obviously you want a little bit more movement in there than those 2 pitches, but it was working for Noah. But my question is, I guess it wasn't working enough, because he went from starts to 1 start, which was in Tampa, where I can't remember the reliever that pitched in front of him for an inning, but Noah started the 2nd through the 6th or 7th.
It was like, because
I think he got 5 innings.
5 innings or 4 2/3, somewhere around that neighborhood.
He got 5 innings in, so that was 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th. So through the 6, he held them to 1 run, and they got the victory. Huge start, and not only the best team in the AL, but one of the best home records as well in Tropicana. And that was pivotal. And I was like, all right, like, that's quite the answer from Noah, considering he answered from that Rangers start that we saw in Arlington. So you thought like things were going well, right? But then you had the whole mix up at home versus the Cleveland, with the whole mound visit situation, taking him out of the game because there was not communication with the pitch or the coaching staff. So I was like, I would think you would at least give Noah another shot with that whole mix up situation, but to flat out option him after that with the whole situation, and then you bring up, which me ultimately, right? I wanted Hagen and Tanner up when they were healthy, which was weeks ago, like at least 3 weeks ago. But they did get their debuts as they should have. And I preferably wanted Noah and Tanner to piggyback off each other to help Tanner build his innings up and Noah to finish the year strong in the organization and get his development going into the end of the season. So hopefully we're seeing a better version of Noah going into October. And we talked this with Slav, that would be great. You know, your top ceiling arm, developing organization. That's what you want. You want to get these guys going in that direction. And then, but to send him down, and then you're in a situation where you're trying to figure out what you're, and this is after the trade deadline. So you're trying to figure out what you have in the 3 arms that are right now working for you. You got 2 arms on the back half that you're trying to figure out, where are we going to get these arms to fill those spots in? But ultimately we're sticking with the bullpen. Makes no sense. So then, like you're saying, Jay, right? We bring Tanner up, and in his debut, he just can't find the strike zone. Okay, that's a debut, right? So there's no excuses for, not throwing strikes or whatever, but it's understandable where the nerves are in your debut. But right after, I don't know. Only the organization is going to know what actually happened. Where we, us content creators, anyone else, we don't know what's going on behind closed doors. Maybe there's something just crazy going on with Tanner. I don't want to speculate further than that, but there's got to be something else, because it doesn't make sense for a talented arm like that to send him down to Charlotte right after his debut when you need arms in that bullpen, especially with talent that he has and the stuff that he has. So, yeah, Jay, I don't know. I just that left me flabbergasted.
They're treating him like he Mason Adams or Gabe Davis, Gonzo. Like, think about that. We've had more sample size on Mason Adams and Gabe Davis, and they got traded. You called Tanner McDougal up for what? Wild.
Which, I'm gonna be honest, like I'm one of the people that I don't mind that deal for Doyle, giving up Mason Adams. I like that for at this very moment. I like that for the defensive alignment right now. We're gonna get what we get out of the bat, but defensively that's gonna help us out down the stretch, because defense is gonna be huge down the stretch. Hopefully the bat picks up for Doyle. But at the very least, defensively, I'll take it, right? I don't know what Adams is going to look like, coming off Tommy John. So we'll see. Hopefully the best. I wish him the best. Pitching in Coors Field is going to be difficult, but we wish him the best. But yeah, Jay, doesn't make sense. But yeah, that leads us to going forward. Like, what are we going to see down the stretch? Are we going to see them relying on their veterans? Are we going to see this kind of, I don't even know what you want to call it, because it's just not relying on the development of the youth. It's going to be an interesting situation, and they're going to, Chris Getz, because he didn't deal for arms at the trade deadline, he's going to have to rely on the youth. Like, whether he wants to do it or not at this point, he has to do it. And I don't think there should be a doubt in that either, because this going forward, this is the core that you have to develop on the pitching side. We've said it many times, Jay. The hitting side is looking great in the organization, developing well. Pitching side, not so much. You got anything else to add, Jay, before we
Yeah, I just
going
want
to
I just
Detroit.
want to see I just want to see Tanner McDougal get a little bit more run. I feel like the Cubs versus Sox series was a perfect opportunity. He's rested. His you don't have to get him geared up. This is a rivalry series. Now, mind you, even through the American League Central, the Chicago Cubs is the best team.
And it looks like we're still getting technical difficulties with Jay right now. It's all right. Please bear with us, everybody. As you can imagine, with the storms that went through the Chicagoland area, clearly there's, we're having some issues with some of our, not me, because I'm in Michigan, fortunately, but I know Jay is having some difficulties, where he's at, and it's understandable. So please, everyone, be patient with us. We're trying to work with this as we go. Let me finish this text with Jay. But where Jay was headed was essentially looking at the division going into the series, which was what I was alluding to prior. Again, going into that series in Detroit, like I said, Detroit had the best diff in the division in the 80s, and Sox were at 40s in the 40s in second, while still having the divisional lead, which is impressive. But as it stands now, Detroit is now in fourth place after that sweep, which pushed the Minnesota Twins and the Cleveland Guardians ahead of them. And just for a picture of what we see going down the stretch here, with about over a month of baseball left to play here, the second and third place teams in the division have differentials in the negatives, with the Minnesota Twins having a differential of negative 41, Cleveland Guardians negative 26. So essentially the opponents are outscoring them offensively, which just gives you understanding of how the pitching looks for those teams if they're getting outscored. So granted, Cleveland Guardians did just get back Jose Ramirez, although they did have Chase Stallowder get injured as well. So, that's tough to see for them. But look, as it stands, Minnesota Twins 4 games out out of first place, giving us a good buffer room there. Whereas the Cleveland Guardians are 5.5 back with the Detroit Tigers. So we do have room, a lot of buffer room in the division right now, which is awesome because I think if I remember right, the Detroit Tigers now have the Dodgers and the Brewers coming into town to play. So I would imagine, again, it's baseball, anything can happen, but I imagine with how things are going, that's going to knock them out of any chance to truly. Because if you ultimately look at it, if the Sox played 500 baseball, that means that Detroit would have to play 6 games over to catch up. And with the difficult schedule in front of them, I don't think that's possible. I don't think that's going to be something that's truly going to happen. So from here on out, it looks like it's going to come down to Twins and Guardians. And Guardians have been back and forth. Really, honestly, it's going to come down to the Twins, which if you asked me before the season started, I would tell you the last 2 teams in the division, that I think would be having any chance of contending for the division would have been our White Sox and the Minnesota Twins. So the fact that we are in August and the White Sox and the Twins are the 2 teams in top of the division right now is really why you just can't predict baseball, the game of baseball, the game of failure. But for me, that and the rest of the White Sox fan base, we're ecstatic right now. So coming out of the Detroit series, the fact that you get that sweep, it really takes away, for me at least, the thoughts of winning the division, where for me, it's more so resetting expectations really for this organization right now, because yeah, sure, maybe the Twins do make this close at the end of the day. But for me, being in the shoes of like if I were in Chris Guess's shoes right now, and really more so Will Venable leading this team right now, it's really focusing on the 2 seed, getting that wild card bye. And because when you look at the American League, you got to get those first 2 seeds to get that bye for the divisional series. So we will see if the White Sox get lucky to be that 2nd seed. It's going to be a race right now at the top with the 3 seed, which right now is the Houston Astros, and the rest of the AL East and West, because you got the 2 wild cards to also see if they're going to be, because the AL East has 3 teams at the top of their division right now battling for that 1 seed, with Tampa, Boston, and New York Yankees. And it's going to be interesting to see who's going to get those 2 byes from the AL. The AL is wide open for everyone tuning in with us tonight. Please be patient with us. Like I said, Jay will be back momentarily, having technical difficulties. But before we get into the crosstown part of this, I do want to mention again that going into the month of September, this is a pennant race. This is truly an AL pennant race for the White Sox. You can say what you want about the division. For me, the talk should be about getting that 2 seed, which is crazy to even think about when it comes down to it. But again, I do want to take this time before we even start this crosstown conversation and just think of where we're at as a fan base right now. We watched this team lose 3 straight seasons of 100 losses. And now this is a team that is at the moment not only first place in the division, they are 6 games above 500, and there is a real conversation that they can have a bye going into the postseason in October, which is unbelievable. Truly proud of this young team taking a step forward, and because they're playing, everyone's going to say they're playing with house money, but your Murakamis, your Vargases, your Antonacci, Maedroth is having a crazy season right now defensively. Peters is off the wall. You just have, a bunch of this core having that true progression, and some that we haven't seen offensively in over a decade. And that, again, we were kind of alluding to it a little bit earlier, but it came down to what, Chris Getz was going to do at the trade deadline. As we saw, he kind of ultimately, how I viewed it, played it really conservative, wanted to see what was truly there of this roster down the stretch. Again, we wish he had at least one move of aggression to help build further upon what is being built with this core. But it is what it is. And down the stretch, we just have to hope that we have at least one arm, because you've got you got Burke and Anthony Kay right now pitching out of their minds. You have 2 starters right now. I want to say Castillo is going to be there. He's kind of been back and forth since he's been traded here. So you can say 2.5 if you want to say so. But that means that we need to see either something from Fetty, will Davis Martin bounce back? Are we going to see Noah Schultz come back to the mold eventually? There's been conversations of Drew Thorpe and Shane Smith down in Charlotte at the moment. But we need, out of all those names I just listed, at least one in there to truly, get this rotation into form down the stretch here with at least three. We need at least three, right? Clearly we need 5 guys, but you need at least average guys to fill out the back half of that rotation down the stretch here. And hopefully we get it, because this is all we have at this point down the stretch. So again, going into the Crosstown Classic, we saw, clearly we saw it start off how it did with, no rotation setup going into it. Again, they knew this going into the Crosstown Series. So I don't know what Will Venable had aligned with going into the series, who was available, who wasn't available, but there should be no excuses for that, right? If you're available, our arms need to execute, but not only do they need to execute, they need to be put in a position to do so. So this is a segment. We're going to start off with the Crosstown, where we're going to talk about our manager, and this is Will's Way.
The most important thing is to just set really clear expectations for our group and how we're going to go about our day and the things that we're going to do to build a foundation to be the kind of team we want to be. But it's also about cultivating a winning culture and being passionate about coming to work every day and creating a positive environment where people know that we're going to face some tough times like everyone does across the league, but at the end of the day, we're going to do all the things that we need to do to go out there and compete and play hard, holding each other accountable to things that you've set expectations for. But get ready, because we're going to go out there and play good baseball. It's going to be exciting. We hope to see you out in the field.
All right. That is the beginning to our segment with Will's Way, as you heard from our manager. And just to give context, up until the 8th inning, Will was doing his thing, mixing, matching with, after the starter left the game, goes to the bullpen, and eventually he pinch hits Andrew Benintendi, and Benintendi hits a bomb, gives the Sox a lead going into the 9th. And unfortunately, at the top of the order there, you had, it wasn't top of the 9th. It was in the 10th. And, the Cubs ended up tying it after Grant Taylor gave up a run. That was game 2, Grant giving up. But that's right. Game 1, Grant Taylor wasn't available. So, Will went about who he, was able to go to. And Cubs tied it, goes to extras with the top of the order. And as you will see, or as you have seen, I should say, Will ultimately goes with Hagen Smith, the rookie, to go up and pitch to Pete Crow Armstrong with a runner on second, games on the line, with first base open. And not only does he decide to pitch to PCA, but the count actually gets to 2-0. Eventually, Hagen Smith does get a strike with a fastball that Pete just took. So the count was 2-1. Again, you're pitching from behind. In an ideal world, your manager should put, again, with a favorable account to the best hitter, one of the best hitters in the National League, just being straightforward with you. That's a perfect time to put PCA to first base. And it doesn't even matter. Like, you shouldn't even factor his speed at that point, because you have Carson Kelly at second base in front of him. So, Pete has nowhere to go. No one, he's got a catcher running in front of him. So again, if you put Pete Crow at first base, you would have first and second. nobody out with say coming to the plate, and that gives you an opportunity for a ground ball. You shouldn't even, I should say, you should be focused on a ground ball outcome in that situation. You shouldn't be thinking about pitching to PCA for the hypothetical of a strikeout for just one out, with the runner still at second. I don't understand the baseball side of that. And again, if you put PCA at first with the runners at first and second, you have Seiya coming to plate, the hypothetical and the outcome you're hoping for is a ground ball to at least get two, if not one out. And again, you want to have Seiya beat you, then PCA beat you. And what we saw was on a 2-1 pitch, we saw Pete Crow Armstrong walk it off. And again, for me, it's just inexcusable in that situation to pitch to PCA. But let's go to, we got a video here with Will talking about that situation from game one here in the post game. And let's take a look and watch Will Venable.
Are tough, and certainly understand when PCA, walks you off there, and he's such a good player and such a good hitter. But I trust the information that we have. That's been part of our process this entire year. Sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. In the case of last night, first of all, with Hagen being the guy, you go into that inning before you expect to score a run, and you have to make a decision then on who you're going to use, and Hagen was the right guy, and then we don't score, and then you're in a tough spot, and you're just trying to figure out, all right, with the information that I have as I'm observing the game, where guys are at, Hagen and his skill set, what's the best path for us getting through this without scoring a run? And again, leaning on our information, we had Hagen as a significantly better matchup against PCA than Suzuki, and so you get to walk one of them, and you got to make a choice, and I chose to hopefully try and get PCA out, walk Suzuki, and then deal with Bush and Owen Miller. So that was the thought process behind the decision. And again, sometimes these things just don't work out. And I also understand too, PCA is a really special player, does special things. Suzuki is too, and I had a choice to make. And again, I just leaned on my information to make the best choice possible, and it didn't work out.
I think that's been like a story around baseball for the past 20 years. It's like information versus gut feeling sometimes. How do you balance that out? Do you usually go with the info first? You know what I mean? Or if your gut feeling is different?
Yeah, so my approach is that, we have information, and that's important, and that really grounds your decision making, but then we have collaborative discussions and talk about how we want to deviate about that, and then ultimately I make a decision. So that's our process in everything that we do, whether that's resting guys or bullpen use, pinch hits, that's part of the process. And so that's something that we stick to, and at the same time, PCA is a really special player, and yeah, he's scary, but so is Suzuki. You know what I mean? He is too, and again, factoring all those things in with the information, the gut, whatever you want to say, that was the decision that I thought was best for us.
How much do you want to stay committed to what you're doing? Because by the same token, you could have stuck with Grichuk instead of pitching Benintendi because he's been good in that game so far. How much room do you give yourself to allow that subjective information or kind of a feel for the game to creep into kind of what your pre-established strategy is and kind of sticking to that in the long run?
I think there's a threshold, you have the information and it gives you a little bit of a head start, and then if there's a gap or I have a feeling that overcomes that gap in information or the matchup, then obviously you don't make the decision. In the case of yesterday, yeah, it's painful to take Rich out of the game, right, because he's in such a good spot with the gap in that matchup with Benny against Sefferjohn. Thought that it was enough to overcome my just feeling of confidence in Gritch, and really my confidence in Benny in that matchup led to that decision. So yeah, you kind of factor those all in. It's not a perfect science, but you start with the objective stuff, throw in some gut, talk about it with the boys, and make a decision.
You have two of the
Alrighty, that was Will, and excuse me, that was actually before. That was actually pre-game, before game 2 that we got that nice little clip from James Fagan of the Sun Times there before the game, and that was Will discussing the end of game 1. I'm not going to lie to you. I was really hoping that Will would come out and hold himself accountable and just flat out be straight up with, like when he's made mistakes this season, after the fact, he will hold himself accountable and go out and say it how it is and tell it how it is. And from that point, I thought he was going to go out and do that. And honestly, I mean, again, I respect that answer from him the day after, but again, I was hoping he was going to be blatant with his answer, talking about his mistake, because in my opinion, he tiptoed in that video in the beginning of that. And he was trying to even tell you that, he was waiting for, or actually, hold up, let me go back and find his exact words from in the actual post game of game one. He actually went out and said flat out, I gotta find it here. Give me a second. So Will Venable said in the wake of this that PCA wasn't an option with Seiya coming up. So in the actual post game, Will literally doubled down on that decision he made, trying to essentially say that he was more so worried about Seiya than PCA. Like, in what world are we even, should that even be a sentiment? So again, I give Will the respect for giving a thorough explanation to where his thoughts were in game one. I don't think it should, I think that's inexcusable, but again, I give him credit for going out there, talking with the media and just, taking it on. We saw Ozzie Guillen, we saw him take, him take the criticism before the players. So as far as a leader, I can commend Will in that situation. However, that's not the first time we've seen Will with in-game decision-making lately falter. And hopefully this is a learning moment for him. I will say, though, from what he did say there, to me, it seemed like he also ultimately wanted to take the blame, and he didn't really want to throw his analytical department under the bus in that situation. Because, again, he leaned on them in the eighth for the matchup for Benny versus the righty. So that paid off. That is an easier, if I'm being honest, that is an easier analytical decision to make. But again, I can understand him not wanting to throw his analytical unit under the bus, ultimately for that being the reason why it costed the game, even though it did. But again, ultimately, you just want to make sure your manager doesn't make the same mistake twice on the same principle. And ultimately, if I'm being honest with you, the only true positive concept of this for me was giving a rookie, Hagen Smith, putting him in that environment where the odds are actually against Hagen in that situation. Because, again, we're going to get to it, that with the reverse splits of PCA, Hagen Smith, as a lefty, PCA has reverse splits. So again, Hagen was not in a favorable matchup there. Because again, PCA has reverse splits. But what I'm getting to is Will Venable puts the rookie in a playoff environment with the odds against him to see if he can test him. And he's testing him in the regular season for the situation, because ultimately we're coming down to October baseball around the corner, and he's putting his rookie to a test. And obviously we saw what happened there. Hopefully Hagen learns that, again, even though, and I know this is me, in this situation, that when you are behind in the count, PCA is up 2-1 in the count. If you're going to throw that off-speed pitch, you better execute that off-speed pitch, and it better not be left over the plate. You better get that on the corner or out of the zone. You can't leave that in the heart of the plate, or else that's going to be put right over the scoreboard as it went in a walk-off fashion. So if that's the situation, like if Will is just testing, if he's just going to keep things behind closed doors and he's just testing, the rookie in that situation, because he had Brazoban warming up. Like that's a situation that Brazoban probably should have been in instead. But he went to Hagen Smith. And if he was testing Hagen, if that's it, at the end of the day, if this is truly testing Hagen, I have an understanding of that. And I really hope it pays off, because again, we need, when that bullpen is going to have to get key outs in October. So I really hope this pays off. And again, if we're talking about Hagen in high leverage situations in October, and this ends up benefiting Hagen, then I can absolutely forget about what just happened now. Because again, at the end of the day, this is a regular season, right? We are an independent race, but again, the focus should be on continued development, like I said early on, and that's where I hope this ends up being for Hagen. Again, that's game one. Let's talk about game two. Game two, again, we had a rain delay. It kind of altered the situation that Will was going. And, he wanted Grant Taylor to throw multiple innings. That wasn't the case. We saw Grant Taylor having to leave the game because of the rain delay. And again, Brazoban ended up coming in, and Brazoban got walked off by Bregman. And we've got Sam Phelan on X, I should say, posted this awesome tweet after the game. I'm going to share with you guys. Shout out to Sam Phelan. And for our audio listeners, he posted, Sean Newcomb is better against righties than lefties, only giving up a 564 OPS. No reason he shouldn't be in the ball game there with the game on the line. Another night, another loss where you have to question Will Venable. And again, Brazoban came in the pitch. Brazoban couldn't find the strike zone. And again, Sean Newcomb only gives up a 564 OPS when it comes against righties, which in this situation, it was Alex Bregman. And we got Ryan McGuffey giving us an update of game two, saying that Will Venable said today that last night was the first time they had to think about tomorrow, which was today being Wednesday. But during the game with Newcomb warming for a possible save situation, otherwise every day is about winning today and not looking ahead. Rotation back to normal tomorrow with K in play, or when he says tomorrow, he's talking about Thursday with the makeup game against the Braves. But ultimately, Ryan McGuffey is bringing up here that this is talking about today in today's game, or at the end of Tuesday night going into Wednesday, that was the only day that they were thinking about winning today and not looking ahead. Which, I mean, I'm not going to take any shots about McGuffey here. He's just posting the situation of what Vil was saying, but that's just a straight up lie. Like, we saw that he was clearly thinking about tomorrow on Monday night and that walk off against PCA. So it was just a bunch of, being honest, a bunch of BS in that situation. But we saw each game in that series, they were thinking about tomorrow instead of the day of. And independent race, you're thinking about saving, arms for the next day, when it should be about getting wins in the moment. Because again, you end up losing the series. You only take one game in Wrigley and you lose two in a situation that essentially you could have swept the Cubs in 3 pitches. If you were actually focusing on the day of, you have a potential there to take all 3 games at Wrigley. You also you can play that both ways, right? You can get swept in Wrigley, and you could have swept the Cubs in Wrigley. But it really came down to 3 pitches, and ultimately it came down to not focusing on, not having that focus at hand, I should say. Sorry, excuse me. And again, we saw Newcomb begin day 3. Newcomb begin in day 3. Apologize for that. But look, White Sox, with everything stacked up against them, they were down, 2 games in the series. A lot of Cubs fans brought the brooms to Wrigley, and Sox ended up taking the game on earlier today, 3-0. And I kind of brought up earlier in the show that Jose Urquidy didn't have, he struggled in Comerica. Everything was flat, gave up a couple home runs, and it wasn't looking good. Thankfully, the offense woke up and saved him. But today, he absolutely balled. Went 6 innings, 8 strikeouts. That's the Jose Urquidy that you're hoping that we would see. And listen, if we see that going forward, that is huge, because that is absolutely what we need right now, especially taking one from Wrigley. Again, we got K going tomorrow, so we still have a whole nother week of games to go through with no rest. So this White Sox team needs to absolutely take. It's a tough team going to Atlanta and playing the Braves, but we're going to get to that in the schedule momentarily. But again, you walked out of Wrigley stealing that game today, really, and it's just total. The emotions are all over the place, right? Going from beating the Tigers and sweeping them in the division to, losing the series in the Crosstown versus the Cubs. But ultimately, I can't be too upset, because what we saw is, this true fans of this sport and the city of Chicago, that was great baseball. Ultimately, at the end of the day, 2 teams fighting at it. We haven't seen these 2 teams competitive, both being competitive at the same time for quite some time now. And that was awesome. And it feels totally, amazing that we are in a situation where September is coming up, and we both have teams that are either 1 leading the division or 2 second up in the division, but still fighting for a division. And that it is completely awesome for both sides, both fan bases right now. But let's get down to the upcoming schedule. Coming up here, as we get to near the end of the show here, we're going to go over the upcoming schedule, and then do picks to click, and then we're going to wrap it up. But for those tuning in, it's just myself at the moment. Jay did have some technical difficulties, and ultimately we should get him back next week. He won't be coming back tonight just due to the circumstances, but we will see Jay back, and I'll need my brother next week, because there'll be more baseball to talk about, and we have a nice, awesome guest to join us next week as well. So I will kind of allude to that later in the show. But tomorrow we have, I apologies. The White Sox are at home tomorrow. For some reason, I thought they were going to the Chop House in Atlanta, but that's not the case. Tomorrow is a makeup game at the Rate, starting at 2:10 in the afternoon. So nice little early game tomorrow. But it is Anthony K going up against Grant Holmes. Again, just a makeup game, 1 game only. Anthony K has been on fire, and we're gonna flat out need Anthony K to be out there and be that softball that he is, be that dog that he has been for us recently. Again, as far as hitters wise for Atlanta, and the first 2 games of that series, we actually never saw Baldwin, the catcher, Drake Baldwin. We haven't seen him because he was injured, and ultimately he's really the energy. I was going to say the energy bunny, that from the Energizer commercial, but you got Matt Olson, Acuna's healthy as well. That should be a good true test for the White Sox at the rate. However, the White Sox being at home, um, this can come down to a bullpen game as well. Unfortunately, saying that, but I think again we have to see who's truly available, because I did see Grant Taylor pitch today. So I would imagine we could see Hudson, if this comes down to a late game again, coming down to the bullpens, maybe you see Hudson close out tomorrow. It seems like Will has been going to Hudson recently as the closer for down the stretch. In Detroit, I thought he would go to Grant Taylor, but he went to Hudson twice out of that series. So keep your eyes on the closing situation here in Chicago. It should be rotating by committee here on out, it seems. I think the White Sox end up winning tomorrow. I think they're going to come back home, from the north side and regroup and pull this victory out for our fan base at home. And then we have a pivotal series this weekend. Pivotal for us because you have the New York Mets coming into town. This is a team that is 12 games under 500. So this is like, if you're a serious team right now, if you're going to be a contender in the AL, you got to beat these teams that are under 500. And the Mets have a 3-game series here coming up at the rate Friday through Sunday. Friday's matchup, again, our top of rotation starts game 1 on Friday with Sean Burke going up against Sean Manaea. Again, I think lately the rookie Carson Bench, Soto's still injured, but Carson Bench has been a really solid rookie for the Mets that has debuted recently in this past month, and his slash line at the moment is 272, 334 on base, and a 418 slug. Not bad for the rookie. That's a guy to keep an eye on. So keep an eye on that. But I'm liking the White Sox in game 1 taking that against Manaea with Burke on the mound. Hopefully Burke can bounce back from the last start that he had. Saturday is looking like it's going to be Luis Castillo versus Christian Scott. Scott's been doing well recently, actually, but with Castillo coming back home to the south side, I like that matchup for the Sox. I think both are going to have. I think game 2 actually will come down to the bullpen, because I think both those pitchers would probably have solid starts in that game with Christian Scott and Luis Castillo. But I can see the White Sox again taking that game as well at the end for game 2. And then game 3, again, this is ultimately, again, because you got 2 starters, unfortunately for the Sox. Game 3, or ultimately be game 3 matchup is looking like it's going to be Nolan McLean. And for the White Sox, it's been undecided. So we have to see again, are the White Sox going to call up a throw versus Shane Smith down in Charlotte, or are they going to keep to the bullpen, or keep to a bullpen, matchup, which they might do, just because Nolan McLean is the Mets' best pitcher this year. And that's going to be a tough test for the White Sox on Sunday. I think the Mets win game 3, but ultimately, when it comes down to it, I think this is going to be a White Sox series win. with the New York Mets coming to town. I think the White Sox take the first 2 games and take 2 of 3 versus the Mets. And that wraps up the weekend. So this is how we're going to end up the show, with talking picks to click. It's looking like I gotta go to the group chat here and see who the guys took again. I know Slavko won last week, so Slavko won with Vargas, and with Vargas off the board for this week, looks like Slavko is going to go with Colson Montgomery for Slavko's first pick, which I like that pick by Slavko, because Colson, again, like I said, going into that Detroit series, he was cold, and we saw him start to pick it up a little bit in Detroit, but then we saw him for sure in game 2 and today start to pick it up again. So hopefully for Slavko has a good lead in first place and with our picks to click. So hopefully Slavko continues to roll. And next up was OJ. OJ is going to go with, he has got Mydroth. And another great pick of the broadcast here for OJ, Chase Mydroth. Chase Mydroth is getting near a 3 WAR. I'm not crazy with WAR, but for me, when I see those WAR conversations, the fact that he has a 3 WAR tells me that, again, if you look at the stats, it looks like it's mostly the defense. But the fact that I did see in the broadcast, I think it was game 2 versus the Cubs, that they talked about Chase with his slash line. He has 100 points of progression in each stat with his average, his on-base percentage, his slug from last year to this year. So if that holds up, that's a huge, component, that this infield needs. Not only that glove at second base, but the bat that comes with it. And that's a guy that Will's been mixing and matching with, up in the lineup and, near the bottom at the back end of that lineup to push that lineup around. So love the pick, OJ. We'll have to wait and see what Justin has. I'm going to, let's see, who am I going to go with tonight? I think just with how things are going at the dish, with what I saw from Braden Montgomery, maybe not so much in the Wrigley series, but definitely in Detroit. And we saw bits and he was taking some good hacks at Wrigley, but they were pitching more off speed to him. And whether it was Gosman's splitter or, some of their pitches, like the relievers like Webb with his changeup, he was throwing low in the zone to him. For whatever reason, it didn't seem like Braden was seeing the off speed that well. But I'm going to roll with Braden Montgomery for this week, and hopefully he can run into a few for me, as I did win with him before. So Braden Montgomery is going to be my pick to click. Got to see what Jay is going to have here momentarily. Jay has, let's see. I haven't seen Jay pick anyone yet, but we'll keep you guys updated as Jay gets his pick into us. During the week, we'll announce it for you guys. But just to wrap it up with picks to click, we got Slavko picking Colson Montgomery. OJ's picking Chase Mydroth. I'm going with Braden Montgomery, and Jay's to be determined. So that will be our picks to click for the night. Again, thank you for everybody for tuning into this week's podcast of the Blackout. We dealt with quite a bit of technical difficulties to begin the show, and we apologize for that. We'll definitely work on it and make sure we are clear of any technical difficulties to come. Do our best to, at least. But next week's show, we're going to have Big Z on with us. If If you don't know who Big Z is, he's on the Chicago Talks. He does Chicago Talks Sports, talking both Cubs and White Sox. And he's also a part of the Tape Never Lies network, where he covers the Chicago Bears. But a really great character, and excited with his acumen as I've been paying attention to his stuff recently. And we're going to have him on the show next Thursday night. So if you can, and if you have free time in your schedule, if you're watching or you're going to be listening to us, please prepare yourselves for our first time guest coming up next week. Excuse me. Excuse me for the air there. But we have, again, Big Z is joining us next week. Please tune in for that show. We were supposed to have on Elijah Evans, but we had to postpone that for September. Elijah's had a busy schedule lately, so we will get Elijah on to talk about our minor league system and do our annual breakdown that we normally do. But again, Big Z next week. So we got a couple guests lined up for not only Big Z to end August, but we should have on Elijah to begin September as we push down the line here. We have a pennant race, folks. So we have a lot coming at you. So please join us as we go down the stretch. Thank you for tuning in and watching the Blackout.